Likeable leaders. I am so excited today. A brand new, very, very exciting guest to introduce to you in just a moment. But first, as always, I like to give away books, and my guest has an amazing book, actually. My guest today has a book called Why is Everyone Smiling? And I'm going to ask him about that in just a moment. But first, let's start giving some books away. Post a comment right underneath this video and let me know where you're from, or what questions you have, or what you want to learn today. And every single comment is a chance to win a copy of my guest, Paul Spiegelman's book, Why is Everyone Smiling? We'll start giving away books in just a minute. But first, I want to welcome said guest. Paul Spiegelman is the co-founder of the Small Giants community. He's also the former chief culture officer of Stereocycle and the founder of Barrel Health and the Barrel Institute. He is a fellow New York Times bestselling author and has been honored with the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. Paul's a sought-after author on leadership, employee engagement, entrepreneurship, corporate culture, and customer relationships. He's appeared all over the place: Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Inc. And welcome to Likeable Leaders, Paul. Great to see you here.
Great to be with you, Dave.
Thanks so much. Tell me first and foremost, as we start to give away copies of this, why is everyone smiling, and what is Why is Everyone Smiling all about?
Well, it's about my original company, a company that I had founded and ran for about 30 years. And we were very much known for our culture. And we would have these tours, Dave, of our site, which was a former Walmart. We were in the call center business in healthcare. So we had this big site with 400 seats, and we would bring our prospective clients to come visit us and tour the facility. And they would walk around. They would be from hospitals in different parts of the country, and they would outsource services to us. So one way we would sell is to say, come visit us. So they'd start to go on this tour. I'd say hello when they first got there. And at the end of the tour, they would invariably say to me, just, everybody is so happy here. Why is everyone smiling? I said, I don't know, ask them. And so we'd have these sessions where they would talk to our employees. And so the book is really about partly my own biographical journey, but it's kind of the small things that we all do to make our employees smile and how that leads to a better and more profitable company.
I love that. I find myself saying quite often to small business owners and entrepreneurs that I'm talking with, I find myself reminding them so often that we spend more of our awake time at work than we do with our families, in our hobbies, doing pretty much anything. And so as leaders, we better make our work atmosphere, whether it's virtual or physical, a great place to work. And it sounds like Why is Everyone Smiling has a lot of wisdom in there for how to do that.
That's right. And nowadays, I think that the lines between work and home are very blurred. Of course, that's been even more so in the last year. But just generally, the fact is we need to connect our home and work lives. And the best way to do that is to create an environment in which people love what they do and feel passionate and valued in their work. And so that's what we try to do. And smiling comes along with that.
Awesome. Now, of course, I'm going to feel all this pressure to smile throughout this interview, but that's okay. At the end of the day, I'd rather be smiling than frowning, for sure. So Christina is our wonderful apprentice and producer here. Christina, feel free to send me our very first winner of a copy of Paul's Why is Everyone Smiling? And Christina is also going to feed me questions. So if you have any questions for Paul as we go, or for me, please feel free to post them in the comments, and we will do our best to get to some of your questions. Paul, you are the co-founder of the Small Giants community. Tell us, if you would, please, about Small Giants.
Well, Dave, I sold my original business in 2012, but about 5 years before that, in my entrepreneurial journey, I read this book called Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. And Small Giants, the subtitle is Companies That Choose to Be Great Instead of Big. And kind of like the Good to Great for small companies, for people that are familiar, of course, with Jim Collins' book. But it talked about these privately held companies, many of them were family owned, and what made them special. And I just resonated with the stories that Bo told about the kind of internal cultures that they had built, their commitment to their employees, to their community. And so I wrote a blind email to Bo I had just finished writing my book, the one you mentioned. And I write an email to Bo and said, you don't know me, but I was inspired by your work. And would you consider writing a foreword for my book? And he actually said yes. So he wrote a beautiful foreword for my book. We became friends. And 2 years later, after many discussions of me bugging him to say that there were many people like me that felt this way about business. We obviously wanted to grow our business and make money, but we wanted to do it a different way. We wanted to lead with values and purpose. And as more of an introvert and not really a networker, I wanted to meet other people that felt like me about business. And so I suggested to Bo that we create a community of leaders so that we could identify each other, communicate, help each other, and develop into these kinds of leaders. And so that's where the community developed now about 11 years ago. And so we now focus on really next generation leaders to teach them the practical tools they need to be values and purpose-driven leaders in their companies.
Love it. And we do have our first winner. Congratulations to Logan from Lexington, Kentucky. Logan, you are a winner, our first winner of Why Is Everyone Smiling by Paul Spiegelman. Congratulations. Send us your info and we will get that book out to you right away. And we've got more copies to give away, so please keep those comments and questions coming. So tell me a little bit about the scope, Paul, because I know I'm the president of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization in New York. We've got hundreds of small businesses and entrepreneurs, and of course in my network too, and watching, sure, many entrepreneurs and small business owners. So tell me a little bit about the scope, like is it geography based or employee size? I'm sure there's some sort of membership or training, but how does one get involved? Like who's your typical member or client, and what what do you look for in a small giant?
Yeah. If you think about EO or Vistage or these other CEO organizations, they're wonderful organizations to allow us to try to talk to others that help us grow our respective businesses. And I was in one of those organizations for many years. The difference with small giants is really it's focused on this idea of purpose and values. And we're not so much focused on the bricks and mortar of HR or raising money or anything like that, but how day to day to motivate, create team, create internal and external community. And so we have an annual conference. Our scope is international, actually. It always has been. Our first conference was actually in Germany back 11 years ago. But we go to normally different locations every year. This year, our first virtual conference we'll have, as many are doing, hopefully our only virtual conference. But we do have an annual summit that's coming up in April. And then our primary program is what we call the Small Giants Leadership Academy. And while originally we were focused, like an EO, on founders and CEOs of companies, we found that what we were most interested in is that these practices that we're talking about really sustain in companies long term. And the best way to do that was to go kind of a level below that founder or CEO and try to train those next level leaders, and found them to be so gracious, so passionate, so that it becomes almost like a training program within these companies that they have their leaders go through the Leadership Academy. Our typical client or member, there's no membership fees or anything like that with the Leadership Academy. Our smaller companies that I would say are from the $1 million to $50 million range, have anywhere from 5 to 500 employees, but generally smaller companies who might not have these formal programs in place. And while many leaders, as you know, feel that this idea of purpose-driven leadership, leading with values, they like the idea. The most common question I get is, but how do I do it? How do I do it day to day? Or, you know what, I came up and I was trained more in this command and control leadership style. I like this new way. I hear more about it, but I don't know where to start. And so that's what we teach. It's not how to feel this way, because you kind of have to be wired to accept it. It's not necessarily for everybody, but if you are, we'll teach you how to do it day to day.
I love it. I can't believe we haven't met sooner, frankly, given my work on Likeable leadership and practices to build culture. So I'm delighted. What I get a lot is I like this stuff, but I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. And I'm like, well, if you don't really believe in it to the point where you're willing to spend time and money and energy on this, then you don't really believe in it, right? So you can't really have it both ways. And for me, the dollars and the energy that we've spent developing uh, likable business practices, for lack of a better way to say it, and culture is absolutely money and time well spent. I'm sure you have lots of great examples of folks in the community that really get a lot out of what they learn from you and are able to implement that in their organizations.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that that's a fear going into it. My experience has been that it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money. And even if you do invest in it and spend on these kinds of things, you have to, as normally you would want to see an ROI. And so I argue that what we call the circle of growth, that if you invest in your people, that's going to create their loyalty, which will drive customer loyalty, which will drive revenue and profit into your business, and will then give you the opportunity to reinvest in your people, and the cycle will simply continue. So we look at this investment as a leading indicator of what will come. And so if you let the financials drive your business, we would argue that's not the best decision. Let the people and these practices drive the business. But I remember in the early days of my original company, it doesn't cost anything to show people that you care. It doesn't cost anything to actually listen. It doesn't cost anything to have a bake sale or something versus the big holiday party that you might invest in. So you can start in very small and simple ways. The key is to develop traditions and consistency over time so people trust that you're genuine about your interest in leading a different way.
By the way, we had a former Likeable leaders guest that I have to introduce you to, but we've partnered with them. It's called Good Today, and it's a nonprofit that every single day, all of our employees get an email in the morning asking which charitable organization of two they want to make a small donation to. And that the company is supporting. So basically, we're building in an act of generosity into every single employee's day, first thing in the morning. And I've had this most amazing experience with it. Our employees, the engagement is through the roof. They absolutely love it. And it just it just adds more purpose to one's day and to one's experience with working for us. So very, very big fan. We have a question from Chris. He wants to know, he's interested in driving cultural change. This is a very broad question, of course, but what are your suggestions for how to start when you're interested in driving a cultural change at your organization?
Well, the first thing I would say to Chris is it depends on where you sit in the organization. So are you someone who's a worker, a general worker, a leader, the owner? I say that we're all a reflection of the leader of our organization. So the fact is, if your CEO or founder doesn't get it, I don't give it a lot of chance of succeeding over time. But a lot of these kinds of questions that I get from people like Chris are, yeah, I'd like to see some more of that in my organization, but my CEO doesn't get it, or I'm not seeing it here. And so I think there are some things you can do within your own team to foster improvements. But what I tell leaders of organizations or of teams is that you have to start with yourself and being vulnerable and being transparent with your own team, and to say, you know what, I want to be different in the way I lead. And so that they trust that you're genuine about that. Second is that as you look at developing culture, you want to be inclusive. This is not something that you dictate. This is something that you bring people around you and do together. There's passion in every organization, large or small, for this kind of work. And if you give people the ability to and the autonomy to do this kind of work, they will raise their hand, they will jump on the bandwagon, they will implement programs like your program there for that helps the community. And so if you're working in the organization, you don't see that, I suggest that you speak up and you talk to your supervisor and you try to develop that as best you can. But bottom line is, I expect everybody should feel valued and fulfilled in their work. And at some point, we might have to make a tough choice. If you don't feel that, because there are many companies, there are many small giant like companies and even large companies that treat their employees well, that value their work, and everybody deserves to be at a company like that.
Totally, totally love it. We have another winner, so congratulations, Gina. Gina from New York, Gina Rosser Burnett. You're going to be smiling because you just won a copy of Why Is Everyone Smiling by our guest, Paul Spiegelman. So congratulations. Send us your info. We'll get you out another book. And we have one more giveaway. I like to do for a grand prize. We're going to give away 2 books. One copy of Why Is Everyone Smiling, and also a copy of The Art of People, 11 Simple Ways to Get Everything You Want. Between getting what you want and everyone smiling, I mean, what more could you ask for? So stay tuned for that. I'm going to bring our attention, Paul, to the Likeable pyramid, as we do in every episode of the show. And Christina, if you can, well, I don't even need to ask Christina anymore. She's the best producer on the other side of the Zoom. So what I like to do, Paul, is first allow the audience to chime in, and then I'll ask you as well. We're looking at the Likeable business pyramid, and these are the 11 traits of likable leadership, according to me. Okay, of course, that's just one tiny point of view. But if you're watching, I'd love for you to chime in with which is the most important trait to you as a leader. Is it listening, storytelling, passion, teamwork, surprise and delight, responsiveness, simplicity, authenticity, transparency, adaptability, or gratefulness? Post a comment with your choice, and you could win our grand prize, a copy of Why Is Everyone Smiling, plus The Art of People. But Paul, before we get to the audience, which one or two of these traits resonates the most with you as a leader and as a leader of leaders, truly, in the work that you do with small giants?
I think it's a great pyramid, Dave. I love likable business, likable leadership. Of course, I agree with all of these. And the one that stands out to me, I'm not sure how many people would vote this as number one, but I'm going to say responsiveness. And the reason is it's something that I personally have prided myself on my whole career. I always wanted to be the one that would immediately respond to a call, an email, a text, whatever it was. And I always got these comments that people said, gosh, you are so quick. And the downside is that maybe that meant that I responded at night or on the weekend or any time. And I was always one of those 24/7 CEOs. And my wife would kind of say, you know, you can put that down, it's dinner time. But the fact is that it became part of my personal brand. And still to this day is the way I operate. And I just think if we can look at ourselves as being of service to others, and we can do that by first and foremost being incredibly responsive to them, quick to their needs, then that's going to contribute highly to being a likable leader.
You know, of course, I love this one, and you're right. It is actually one of the lesser picked. I've got to do an analysis of everyone I've interviewed and do the Christina. Note to self: we've got to do an analysis. But I can tell you, it is one of the lesser picked ones. But I think it's so valuable. And I'll tell you a little hack for those of you guys watching that maybe you feel overwhelmed by this one. I think what keeps a lot of leaders from responding quickly is they want to respond right. And sometimes an email, for instance, might have a lot of asks. So what I do, if that's the case, and somebody hits me up with like a big sort of complicated thing, and the timing isn't quite right, or I can't sink my teeth into it yet, or I'm super busy, whatever it is, I will still take, literally, this takes 20 seconds to respond. Super swamped, we'll get to this Monday or next week, or even by the end of the month, depending on the context. And that's still responsiveness. That still tells the person that sent that I care and that I'm going to get to it. But it's not about them, but it's about me and my own issues for why I can't sort of give that full response. I'm guessing you probably do something similar, unless you get few enough emails that you can truly drop everything and respond, fully. Does that resonate with you, Paul?
It does. I think that's the most important thing is just people want to be acknowledged. So if you're really busy, and I just felt like I was actually always there for them. So I never felt like I was too busy, even nowadays where I'm much less busy than I was. People are still kind of amazed by that. So yeah, if it's something that you need to spend some time with, then simply acknowledge it, make a promise, and keep that promise about when you're going to get back to them. That little tip means a lot. That's a great one, Dave.
Okay, great. We have one more question. We have a couple more coming in here. So very exciting. Somebody Ray's asking, how do you quantify success with values-based, purpose-based leadership? And I think that's always a tough one. We got into this a little bit earlier, but how do you what are the sort of the top ways to quantify success?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and something that any leader, especially who isn't doing this kind of work, wants to know. What's the payoff? And I think you got to measure it just like you do everything else. In my call center business, a business that was known for low margins and high turnover, we could look at the fact that we were 5 to 6 times more profitable than our competitors, or we were able to charge 30 to 40% more than them, and connect that to the culture. When I sold my company, I went to work for this public company, Stericycle, as you talked about, a big multi-billion-dollar company. And I took on the role as chief culture officer. And my attempt there was to measure it, because the board of directors was very reticent to invest anything in the culture for a company that had 20 years of being a Wall Street darling. And so what we did is we measured employee turnover. And for example, the CFO and I got together and looked at the employee turnover in that company was costing between 30 and $40 million a year. And we were able to reduce our attrition rate, for our voluntary attrition rate, over the next year by $5 million. That's real money. We were able to show and track our customer scores with our employee engagement scores. And this company happened to have about 200 locations nationwide. And we knew that the top engaged locations were the most profitable. So you do have to put in place the ability to measure the results. And I would argue that you'll be able to show that it pays, not only in having by doing this as the right thing to do and creating a great place to work, but having a more profitable business as well.
Yeah, I know that the cost of hiring a new employee is always more expensive than the cost of retaining a happy, dare I say, smiling employee. Okay, one more question, then we're going to give away our grand prize, 2 books, one for Paul, one for me. How does this change, or does this all change with remote culture? And like just about every company on the planet, of course, in 2021 is remote. You mentioned your summit is remote this year as an example. How does culture building and values-based leadership and culture change for a small giant in a remote world?
Well, I think it's changing for everybody. I think the philosophy is the same. Question is, how do we implement it in a remote and virtual world? And so we have to look at different technologies and ways to bring people together, because look, no matter what business we're in the relationship business. And so there's a lot of talk and dialogue out there, and a lot of best practices coming out about how to practice in a virtual world. Some of our content at Small Giants speaks to that. I think the other opportunity that's come up as a result of the pandemic is we're now talking in businesses about subjects that previously were taboo. Things like mental health, things like social justice and equality, that now we can talk about even more openly in businesses. And so no one of us would like to have gone through what we went through, but it's going to make our companies better and stronger. And sometimes I remember one of our Small Giants members talking about how during the early days of the pandemic, he started having one-to-ones with single moms who were not used to ever working remotely and now had the pressures of being at home. And the most valuable thing he could do was call them at home and just say, "How you doing?" And not even talk about work, but just show that he cared about what was going on in their life. And so it just personalizes some of these things and just amplifies this idea that if we show that we care about people, whether they're with them in person or they're remote, we're going to build stronger, more valuable companies.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me, Paul. I want to thank Christina my apprentice. And I want to thank you again, Paul. And I want to thank most of all of you guys for tuning in and spending your very, very precious time with us today. My grand prize winner, congratulations, Isaac Cisneros, Isaac of Colorado. You are a grand prize winner. You are going home smiling, and you're going home with the skills to get everything you want. Send us your info. We will get a couple of books out to you. Congratulations. And until next time, everyone, have a super likable rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.